Hello, my name is Nura Rachelle. I'm an integrative astrologer and creative confidence coach, and joining me today is Cayelin Castell. We are going to talk about the difference and the similarity of constellations and signs. Why is it important? What does it mean for us now? And so you definitely want to know Cayelin and her work. She is an alchemical astrologer and co-creatrix of Venus Alchemy and My Star Alchemy. She's amazing. In addition to having written the Shamanic Astrology Handbook from transcripts she created in 1993, she has been writing monthly celestial timings for over 27 years and has been featured in many online summits and live conferences, including the Conscious Life Expo. Cayelin enjoys sharing these mysteries through personal readings, articles, online classes, and videos, coming from the visionary understanding that we inform the mysteries as much as they inform us. So you might have heard me quote her on that last part because I think that is one of my absolute favorite teachings from you, Cayelin. So thank you so much for being here with me today.
Yeah, one of my favorite subjects. Of course, I'm here with you to do this. I love it.
It's a huge ongoing conversation. I know it was for me when I first came to astrology. It was like, okay, so there's tropical astrology, there's Vedic, there's sidereal, there's constellations, there's astronomy, there's all of the things. I feel like astrology is inherently an interdisciplinary study. And especially if you are a little bit more of a logical thinker, you might have the question of what is the right system? So, our goal today is to share a little bit more about how we can use or connect with the constellations to inform the signs, or how do they inform each other? And what does this mean for us collectively and individually, and how we can practically work with this, but not in a box, right? Because to me, that need to get to the place of right and wrong kind of misses the point of what astrology can really offer us. So there are so many different styles and traditions and approaches to astrology. There are as many types of astrology as there are astrologers and just ways of being a seeker. And so for you yourself watching this, you might also have your own astrology. You have your own access to the alchemy of astrology through your own vantage point and your experience. And so I've heard you share a lot about this, Cayelin, in your talks, and we are going to provide links of more places that maybe you can lean into this if you're really curious to learn more, especially the astronomy and learning things like the galactic cross and what all of that means. But for today, we're just going to keep it grounded, conversational. Hopefully you'll be able to take something from this that can just help you feel a little bit more safe to explore this and kind of open up the possibility a little bit. And I love the way you frame it. I love how we take the conversation out of this either or dichotomy, out of the question of what system is right. It makes it less of something subtractive, which I do feel like kind of the age of reason has really wanted us to do that. It's like, if we can't prove it, it's not real. It kind of discounts a plethora of ways of knowing. But really, this conversation can bring us back into something that is both and is additive and expansive. So let's just open it up. Let's talk about how you frame the relationship between constellations and signs.
The simple answer of that is the constellations are the starry backdrop, the stars and how they are related to one another. So we see certain constellations in the sky look a certain way. And then the signs are seasons. They're seasonal energies. So one of the things that astronomers and astrologers actually agree on, and before I even say that, I want to say that in ancient times, astronomy and astrology were one together. They weren't separated. And so now astronomers think astrologers are weird, and astrologers and astrologers forgot astronomy. They don't really know the astronomy of how things work, which is how are we bringing that back together to create a greater understanding? So the seasonal signs are determined by the equinoxes and the solstices. And astronomers and astrologers agree that 0 Aries is the March equinox and 0 Libra is the September equinox. And then the December solstice is in June, in December. The December solstice is the winter in the northern hemisphere, and summer in the southern hemisphere. So the hemispheres have a different seasonal experience, but they're experiencing the resonant polarity of those different seasons. So the 0 Aries, 0 Libra, 0 Capricorn, 0 Cancer points are the solstice and equinox points. And they define the seasons, and then the signs 30 degrees after, or 30 days after, because the sun moves about 1 degree a day, is the sign of Aries from the equinox, the March equinox point. And then we have for the next 30 days, the sign of Taurus, and the next 30 days. And then, and the Taurus season will have the cross quarter between the exact point between the equinox and the solstice. And so we have the cross quarter points. And so there's all these seasonal experiences that we're having, and the signs relate to the seasonal energies. So the problem and the challenge is that they forgot that the constellations are different than the seasonal signs, and they name them the same name. So the constellation Aries was named that constellation, or became, it's like the constellation became Aries when the 0 Aries point, the equinox point, was in that constellation. And so all of the constellations are named based on what was happening with the seasons at the time. And so that it makes it challenging for people to realize there's a difference between them. So for that reason, in the work that I do and have been doing for many years, and also this was something that was started by Rudolf Steiner, was to call the constellations a different name. So instead of calling Aries, the constellation Aries, because it's confusing, is call it the Ram. Instead of calling the constellation Pisces, call it the Fish. Now, and one of the good reasons for that is currently the seasonal sign of Aries, the spring equinox, the sun is rising in the circlet of the Fish, and has been in the Fish for the last 2,100 or 2,000 years, or I forget exactly when it went in, but it's been there for a long time. So the season of Aries, right after, right at the spring equinox, that balance of day and night happening in this constellation, is giving us a sense that there's an evolution or something happening between these energies. So if you think about, the constellations have their own energy, the seasonal signs have their own energy, how are they coming together? And the Hellenistic astrologers asked the question, to what degree does the constellation inform the sign? Because they remembered, before we forgot, they remembered that they were two different things. And that there's a process of evolution that happens as the seasonal signs move through all the constellations. And over 26,000 years, every seasonal sign will be with every constellation. That's probably a good place to start.
That's a great place to start. And it sparks for me the importance of understanding how astrology is really the study of the quality of light as we experience it on Earth. And what does that do for us on Earth in our earthly experience? And I know you mentioned in one of your videos, which I thought was great, it's like, well, why are we going to plant a seed in the middle of winter? You could do everything else right, but if the ground's not fertile, it's not the time, right? So we're in this ongoing conversation of divine timing, but the combination of divine timing with quality of light, it for me, like speaking those words together really does something, really resonates with me in that way. It almost makes me feel that a really beautiful entrance point for people into this conversation to deepen it in their own experience might be to spend time with the high holy days, which we consider the equinox points and the solstices, and then also those cross quarter points like Beltane and Lughnasadh and Samhain and Imbolc, to really understand like, oh, this is what this energy, this quality of light feels like in my experience. And now how does that both connect with, okay, say Aquarius as Imbolc, but also the constellation that is informing that time as well. So I'm curious if you've done any work with that.
Absolutely love you're saying this. Of course, at the December solstice in the northern hemisphere, the 0 Capricorn point, and Capricorn to me is like the seed. So it's like where we have the seeds, and this in the seed, it's got a shell around it. It's being contained. And you plant those seeds at the new moon or at the solstice, for the new year, whatever our intentions are, is another way of planting seeds. But it's at Imbolc and the Aquarius time when those seeds start to shake or start to stir. That's called the stirring of the seeds, and break open, and the insides come out, and something new is coming forth. So the old, the outer shell has to be disrupted. So this is how they would see that. So that this, and sometimes you can literally see little sprouts coming up through snow. I've seen pictures of that. I'm like, oh, I live in the desert, so I don't see that too often anymore. But that is part of the reality, that sometimes those sprouts are coming along at that particular season. And then by spring, everything's growing really fast, moving really fast. By Beltane, lots of blossoms and flowers and things are coming along. And of course, by summer, we maybe even having fruit coming along. And then at Lunasa, we have the first harvest, the big harvest. And by the September equinox, again, all this is in the northern hemisphere, we have we start going into that final harvest time as we get to Samhain, and then we're going into the phase where we're going to start over again. So those are very much our seasonal experiences, and we tune into, and our celebrations, like you're saying. I love that Samhain is in celebration of the dead, the Day of the Dead. Where ancient cultures understood this, and we still have some remnants of that that we can tune into and work with and remember, and maybe perhaps create new ways of working with those seasonal points, those high holy days, as you were saying, at this time that works for us now, because whatever our understanding is now is, and what we focus our attention on becomes our reality. So
yes.
Yeah.
100%. And so I know that all of the constellations are different sizes, right? Like some of them take up only a small amount of space in the sky, and then others take up more space. But is it safe to say that at all of these high holy days, so for example, that 0 degrees Aries point, that we're working with the constellation of the fish, at that 15 degrees Aquarius point for Imbolc, that we're working with the prior constellation? Like, can we just pretty much go one constellation back for all of the high holy days?
Pretty much. And so for example, the 0 Capricorn point is on the galactic cross, and you mentioned that in the opening. And so we have there's 2 constellations: the constellation of the Scorpion and the Archer, also known as Sagittarius. And between the Scorpion and the Archer is the center of our galaxy. It's like the Scorpion's tail and the Archer's arrow kind of points to galactic center. But the plane of our solar system, or the ecliptic, the path that the planets travel, goes right through there. And the plane of our galaxy goes right through there, and they cross. So that creates the galactic cross at galactic center. It just so happens over 26,000 years, every single seasonal moment will be with that cross. Just so happens right now, that moment is the December solstice, 0 Capricorn point. So that's can let us know that we're at the turning of a big 26,000 year cycle that's way bigger than the age of Aquarius. So the age of Aquarius would be the spring equinox moving into the constellation, also known as Aquarius, but it's actually the water bearer. That's a whole other conversation. But with the 0 Capricorn point, the winter solstice, or if you're a southern hemisphere, it's the summer solstice point being there. That's a major like sign that something big is happening on planet Earth right now, and that we are probably at the end and beginning of an entire 26,000 great galactic year. So it's bigger than a month. The months are about 2,160 years. So the seasonal signs shift into new constellations about every 2,160 years. So most of the water bearer is overlaid by Pisces, the seasonal sign of Pisces, and most of the constellation that's known as Capricorn, we call the goatfish, or the sea goat is overlaid by Aquarius. So you're right. You can kind of go back and have a general sense. It's not perfectly 100%, but it's probably 80-85% that those signs are overlaying those constellations.
Yeah, it seems like a good starting place for people. And then I know there are some really good softwares that you can play with, like Stellarium is a free software that you can look and see the constellations and then do some tinkering with that. And it also feels really perfect to me because we just had that ingress of Pluto in Aquarius for the following 20 years. And we are going to be, I think, increasing our capacity of using technology to really understand our collective evolution. That's how this Pluto in Aquarius is really speaking to me. And it feels like there's an opportunity to even come into this conversation with more creativity, more meaning making, because that's who we are. We're storytellers, we are meaning makers. I think something that a lot of people have expressed is like, is this just completely made up? Is this just, humans just decided that we wanted answers and so we just made up a system that suited us? And part of me is like, well, kind of, yeah, like that's what we do. But also, astrology is a natural system. It's an observation, like we've been talking about, of the quality of the light and what we're physically observing in the sky and the stars. And so what do we see continually over time? Patterns unfolding. And so it's more of an observation. And then now, how do we choose to relate with that? How do we choose to co-create with that information? So hopefully you're hearing this, watching this, and feeling like, okay, so now that I know that I have a constellation informing maybe my sun sign, I know some people have said things like, I don't know if I 100% resonate with this, but when you talk about the combination of these two energies, now I'm starting to understand that. Would you say the reason for that is maybe because 2000 years ago, when a lot of our current systems that we're now using, like the Hellenistic astrology system and interpretive techniques, are kind of based on when the constellations were overlaid with the signs? And that's maybe where a lot of our interpretations are coming from now. And maybe that's what ultimately began the confusion.
Well, I hope I'm understanding your question. So
I kind of asked like
might
five
go off
questions.
on a tangent somewhere here, but anyway,
Great.
because one of the things that happened is there, I think that if you go far back into the Hellenistic approach, they understood there was a difference between the seasons and the constellations. And some of their work actually started to become the Vedic or sidereal astrology, is looking at the constellations. They're not taking into consideration the signs. So, for example, if I have a Pisces sun, but it's in the constellation of the water bearer, also known as Aquarius. So I've had sidereal astrologers tell me I have an Aquarius sun, because that's their way of looking at it. I have a Sagittarius moon right above the tail of the Scorpion, which is considered debilitated in certain Vedic approaches to astrology. Like, oh, it's over the stinger of the Scorpion, but it's in the seasonal sign of Sagittarius, and so I've been told I have a Scorpio moon. And but if you can see that, you start to understand and look at these constellations and go, oh, when these planets are in the seasonal sign of Sagittarius, they're actually in this constellation, the Scorpion. Then we can start to tune in and get our own answers, because it's not because it's so far away from what we know. So there's the constellation has its own energy. The seasonal sign has its own energy. They're not separate, they're interactive. And if sidereal astrologers really understood that, they wouldn't say, because I've heard them say, tropical astrologers have no idea what they're talking about. But that's because they're named the same names, and they don't realize that tropical astrologers are talking about something completely different than those constellations. And for me, and I've been on a journey in my work for many, many years now, 27, 28 years, on priestess work and bringing back wholeness to humanity, so to speak, is a way to say that. One of the ways we're bringing back wholeness is the wholeness of the understanding of the constellations and the seasonal signs and how they interact with one another. So it's not as you were saying earlier, it's not, it's like, it's this or that. It's really both. And how are we integrating that? How are we coming up with our understanding? Because it's been a forgotten understanding. And so part of it is we're now remembering. And I don't think there are any necessarily rules. And maybe the good news is that we forgot. And now we can have a whole new relationship with it, because it's not based on an old relationship that has served its time. It's like a new, maybe a new birth. Like we talk about the new earth energy coming in all the time. Part of it is because we are creating a new relationship to the sky, to the mysteries of of how the planets are in the sky and interacting with each other and interacting with the earth. And it's without having, I think that it's really important for us to create our own relationship, our own understanding. So we can look at what's been known and in the limited ways that it's been known in the past, and then start to look at how do we bring that and integrate that together.
Absolutely. It's so important. And so, for a lot of people who are coming to astrology who don't necessarily understand, okay, like Antares or the stinger of the scorpion, that is almost its whole own branch of study. So you would really want to learn more about the fixed stars, about the Bohemian stars, and how maybe that plays into some of the interpretations, because that'll give you more understanding of, okay, this mythology is one that I can connect with. I know that that's a really crucial starting point for a lot of people wanting to study astrology, is learning about the stories. What are the other stories that people around the world have told about these parts in the sky? And then starting to overlay that with your own experience and your own understanding. So that could be a really nice starting place. So kind of with that in mind, Cayelin, how would you describe it for yourself, your own experience of, say, your moon? Kind of how does that star in the sky inform the Sagittarius in your experience?
So for me, I feel like it speaks into a shamanic experience. And that, so like Sagittarius can be, a quest for truth and expansion of consciousness, and the seeking, the journey of the seeker kind of thing, seeking, the questing for the spiritual quest is a better way to say that probably. But that can be kind of up and out and not necessarily. So in the Scorpion, for me, it's all about down and in, and having it be embodied and experienced and felt, and not just something that's out here. The other thing I'll just share quickly is that everybody has personal stars. Like, what was the star that was rising when you were born? And also maybe connections to the Bohemian stars that you were talking about, the magical stars of the ancient alchemists. And so sometimes we'll have certain planets that are connected to those. Even if we don't have that, when there are planets passing those stars, that's when the ancient alchemists did their high magic. They did their ceremonies. And one of the things one of the first classes we did in my star alchemy was on the Bohemian stars, because I was wanting to go take a deeper dive into that. And there's certain herbs, there's certain crystals or gems that are worked with. There's certain sigils, magical things. They were making amulets. They were making star bundles, different ways that they were working with these stars. So we explored all of that, which was really fun. And I recognized that I had made a star shield about 2 years before we did this class, that I didn't even know that I had made this star shield that was like connecting into because I put all the royal stars and stuff on the shield. Because I felt inspired to do that. Anyway, these are the ways that we can begin to work with these mysteries ourselves personally. And putting, that you can make there's starlight elixirs. In fact, I have a book called Starlight Elixirs and Cosmic Vibrational Healing that helped inform a lot of our Bohemian star work that we did back in 2021. And this book came out in the 90s, I think it was. It's no longer in print. It's hard to get, but it's amazing. And you can buy starlight elixir. They have, there's a website called Pegasus Products, I think is what it is. And they make these starlight elixirs where they put high powered telescopes and create these elixirs, and then you can tune into these star energies through the elixirs. You can also do it yourself. So maybe not with a high-powered telescope, I don't know, but all just go out and be under the sky when those stars are in the sky and tune in and see what kind of information and insight you get yourself, because this was an entirely channeled book. They were channeling the information from these stars. Pretty amazing. So there's already work that's being done to have a new understanding and relationship with the stars, because of course we forgot and we don't have much that tunes us into them. There are stories that are connected to the stars and to the constellations, mythic stories. A lot of them are Greek, but the Native American culture has a lot. They connect in with specific stars. One of my favorites is the sacred hoop of stars. That is the circle of stars that includes Sirius, Rigel, Pleiades, Capella, Castor and Pollux, and Procyon or Procyon. And that circle of stars has 3 Bohemian stars in it: Sirius, Procyon, and Pleiades. So yeah, I can't remember if Capella, can't remember if Capella is one of them or not. So maybe it even has 4, but these magical stars. And they saw and this is another place where there's a galactic cross, because the plane of the solar system, the path of the planets goes through and enters the sacred hoop when it passes the Pleiades. And then at the June solstice, the 0 Cancer point is right on the galactic cross at the galactic edge, where the plane of the galaxy and the plane of the solar system intersect, between the constellations of the twins, also known as Gemini, but it's overlaid by Cancer, and the constellation of the bull, also known as Taurus, but it's overlaid by Gemini.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's the part that we get to get used to, because we're meaning makers through the language that we use. So if we just popularize it, like we're talking about, okay, so how does the crab influence Leo? Like, how do we talk about all of this? And we just make it a little bit more in the popular lexicon. And I think it's already happening, but this is, I feel like, part of how we are informing our understanding of the mysteries and how we can connect with them. It does feel like it would be really fun to ask your opinion about a planet that everybody can connect with and relate with right now. So maybe Uranus in Taurus. This feels like it's been a big one. So how would you say that the constellation where Uranus is moving through is influencing and informing the energy of what we're experiencing with Uranus and Taurus?
So if we think of so it's in the sign of Taurus, but it's in the constellation of the Ram, which has also been known as Aries. But what's interesting about the Ram, and this one's what I might need to think about a little while, because that particular constellation, when they recognized that the spring equinox point, or the 0 Aries point, was moving into the Ram, it was a constellation that had been referred to as an indentured servant. I forget the exact name of it, but it's like, so a slave. And I was like, oh, well, but now the spring equinox is moving in there, so we need to have a different relationship to it. So they called it the Ram. And Aries, the god Aries, and the more warrior kind of energy and that sort of thing. So is that really the energy of that constellation? I don't know that it is. I mean, we could look at the season of Aries. Things are moving fast. We want to protect and take care of our home and our family, and to be fierce and to be strong and to be committed to whatever it is that we're committed to. That's the season of Aries. And so, yeah, I feel like I need to feel into that a little bit more in terms of the energy of what it's bringing forth at this particular time. The constellation of the bull was where they would see new ages beginning. When there was a crescent moon at a seasonal point, and between the horns of the bull, they knew there was a new season, a new age that was beginning at that time. That was one of the ways the ancient people knew that. And that particular constellation, now the horns of the bull are Gemini, And so it's like, how is that energy of the stability of the bull, who's grounded and earthy, and so a lot of the Thorian things that we think about is connected to that constellation, but it's now overlaid by Gemini. And in fact, the eye of the bull is Aldebaran. It's a royal star, one of the Bohemian stars, one of the magical stars, and it's at 10 degrees Gemini. So how are we seeing things in a new way? How are we expanding our perception? As you were mentioning before, I think Gemini is very, very much about, it's not this, it's not that, it's not either this or that. It's all of this and more. So how do we bring that perception in? And some people are so limited in their perspective. And if we think about the eye of the bull being about perception, so how is Gemini helping to expand our perception?
Mm-hmm.
That's a way to look at that. Some of them are easier to tune into, honestly. Some of them are way easier to tune into. Uranus being all about radical change, disrupting whatever has been so something new can come in. So what is it that's being disrupted in our understanding of the constellation of the Ram? And is our understanding of the constellation of the Ram needing a whole new understanding?
I love that question. And that is something that I feel like that's what we're here for. That's why we have these conversations. So another one that I wonder if might be fun is thinking about, with Saturn in Pisces, tropical Pisces, how the energy of the water bearer would be informing the Pisces. And
I think that's a super good question. Because if you think about the seasonal sign of Aquarius is an air sign, but it's associated with the water bearer, which is a water constellation. And in fact, the goatfish, the water bear, the fish, all and in that area is also some constellations, Cetus, the whale, and the Eridanus, the river. So it's all water in that part of the sky. And all the stories are related to different, mythic stories around water and how things are changing and that sort of thing. So so Saturn in Pisces is in the water bearer, and it just moved out of the sea goat into the water bearer. So moved out of Aquarius into Pisces, and Pisces, the water bearer is pouring water into the southern fish's mouth. It's called Pisces Astrinus, and that's one of the 4 royal stars, named Fomalhaut. And that star is the southern royal star. So all of them have a different direction. The royal stars have a different direction. And so I often think of the image of Kuan Yin when she's got her vase pouring the water into the mouth of the dragon, or into the waters, into the water, whatever that's about. But I think of Kuan Yin a lot when I think of that constellation, because that imagery, it just seems so powerfully connected to it. There's also in the tarot, there's the star pouring the water. You're going to get that?
yeah,
Pouring the water. And I think it's connected to this constellation as well. Yes, beautiful. Yeah, the star. She's the vase pouring the water. And
I think there was an older card I learned where it wasn't one pouring onto the earth and one pouring into the water, but she was receiving one from the heavens and then pouring one into the water, which I think is really cool to know. Like, okay, how did this change, and when did this change, and why did this change?
Exactly. Yeah, and this is part of, like, okay, and if we know things have changed in the past, it's okay for them to change now too. To
Oh my gosh, yeah, because astrology can attract, I think you have to be quite intellectual to be interested in astrology. It's a lot to learn. It's a interdisciplinary study. We're looking at cosmology, theology, mythology, psychology, all of the things, and all of the ologies. And we have a tendency we crave certainty. So I feel like so much of our conversation is really just this invitation to be A co-creator in this process, not feeling like, oh, there's this right answer out there that I need to go and connect with. It's like it's already in here, and it's really just how we're talking about it. It's the language, it's the words. The truth is there, and it's how are we going to use it, and then what influence will that have in how we create our lives, both as individuals and in the collective. I can definitely see how having this conversation will really influence the collective and the conversation just in the field of astrology in general. It's almost like astrology is such a fringe. I mean, it's getting way more popular now, but it's still, we're still on the fringe in a lot of ways. There's still a little bit of the energy of proving. And it feels like amongst ourselves, how can we find this integrative approach where we're honoring all of the different ways of knowing and connecting with this sacred science. And then for individuals, I think we have an even more fun task, because now we get to really tune in with ourselves as creators. We don't want to add to any sort of confusion, but really support each other in making meanings that are organically connected to who we are and our earthly experience. So continually asking the question, what does this constellation mean to me, and what am I also inherently guided to learn about? That's a big question that I get from a lot of people, is like, where to start. And I might, looking at your chart, have a few thoughts around that. But for yourself, like really going into that agency and self-trust of, okay, which gods and goddesses am I connected to? Which stories are just naturally compelling for me? Which parts of the sky am I naturally drawn to looking? When I look in the sky, for example, I always see Orion. I need to learn a little bit more about Orion and all of the stories connected to that, and where maybe that energy is connecting in my chart. So it's a conversation, and I think it takes us out of this it needing to be only an intellectual conversation, but really a full body, integrated, sort of embodied experience. So thank you so much, Cayelin, for all of your offerings, and just your beautiful wisdom that I know has been cultivated over you spending so much time devoted to the field of astrology and just sharing so much with everybody. If you want to learn more about all of the amazing things that Cayelin does and her different teachings and offerings, we have a whole bunch of links for you below. And I have a feeling this conversation is going to continue. There's a lot of ways to.
Oh, we've just scratched the surface for sure. And just one quick thing I want to say, because you were bringing this up so beautifully. I think that what we need to remember is that we are the living embodiment of whatever moment in time we were born. So how the planets were relating to each other, where they were in the sky and with the stars and the constellations and all of that. We become the living expression of that. And there could be 10 people born at the exact same moment, near the exact same place, that will have a different way of expressing these energies. There's not just one way of doing that. And when we're conscious and co-creating, which is so important, and I love that you've said that, because it's how we become, we're being informed by what our natal chart is telling us and what our intention is and why we're here. And we're also informing those mysteries and helping them to grow and evolve. They can't do it without us, and we can't do it without them. It's like, this is how this is the whole thing about wholeness. So thank you for letting me share something I'm really passionate about.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom. Please, if you're watching this, share your questions in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. What pings for you? What lands for you? What would you love to know more about? And share any of your experiences. And hopefully we'll see you again in our next conversation that we have about these sacred mysteries. So thank you so much. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.